Welcome to today's virtual collaborative. The AVID community has always been a place where we lean in, we learn, be inspired, and just recharge for the work that we do for students across the country. And this virtual collaborative is no different. It's where we can do that during this COVID-19 crisis that we are facing here in America and within our educational system. We're so glad that you're here with us today. We are streaming to Facebook, to YouTube, and to Twitter. So wherever you're watching, please make sure that you're commenting, liking, and sharing this fantastic content that we have lined up for you today. And know that we record this session and it will be available on the avid.org/virtual collaborative page, along with resources as well. So thank you for being here. Before we get started, let's just acknowledge that internet is working overtime, and we are doing everything we can to make this experience great for you, including pre-recording some of our segments, but some of this is also live. And so if internet freezes, just feel free to take a breath and know that we're going to get right back to you. We are practicing being flexible and persevering during this time. So today's session is so fantastic. It is focusing on culturally relevant teaching in a virtual learning environment or distance learning environment. And I think the heart of culturally relevant teaching, being able to, it's about creating safe learning environments for our students. Learning requires feeling safe. A classroom that is conducive to learning is one where everyone can actually show up as they are and bring their whole selves to that work. Creating an environment such as that requires authenticity and courage and just facing some of our own unconscious biases. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how we do this well, and we're going to talk about how our students need us to do this now more than ever. This is the time to lean into creating safe spaces for learning, whether it be virtual or at some point when we're all back together in our brick and mortar classrooms, to carry that forward with us. So with that, we are going to start by celebrating World Book Day with a special guest. So we have Clarence, AVID alumni and member of our AVID Board of Directors. He was one of our very first AVID students 40 years ago. And to kick off and celebrate World Book Day, he's going to talk a little bit about the Wall of Fame, and you're going to hear him talk about the history of AVID, where it started, which is a history of culturally relevant teaching, responsive teaching, and just providing students with rigor and effort. What Clarence has to say as we celebrate World Book Day together.
Hi, I'm Clarence Fields, and I'm extremely excited about the AVID Wall of Fame. It's been 20 years since the original printing of the AVID Wall of Fame, and it's due to be reprinted this May. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Wall of Fame, it chronicles the lives of the students that were part of Mary Catherine's first AVID class. It speaks to the challenges that we faced as students, the challenges that Mrs. Swanson faced as she introduced AVID at Claremont High School, and it also speaks to the triumphs of those students over the couple years that we were actually in that very first AVID class. And it means a lot to me to read about those stories, to be a part of the journey of the students that were a part of that very first class. And the amazing thing was that every single student in that very first class went on to college and are doing some amazing things today.
Thank you, Clarence, for just taking us back and helping us move forward as well. I think it's just phenomenal to celebrate World Book Day and think about what culturally relevant or responsive teaching and that one educator can make such a difference, all of us banding together. And so with that, and just continuing through this journey that we're on today around culturally relevant or culturally responsive teaching, we have a special guest for our Ask Avi segment. Avi is the character that lives in our AVID logo, and Avi is who we believe carries a lot of wisdom. And so on our virtual collaborative, we like to invite some of the wisest people that we know to step into the role of Avi and answer a question for us. And so today we have Patrick Briggs with us as Avi. Patrick is, and I need to make sure I get this right because it's a long title. So Patrick is the Area Director, Eastern Region, Northeast AVID. So that's a big title that I actually had to have written down. But more importantly than that big title, he's a champion for all students. And so he's going to talk to us about a question that he is asked so frequently when he is speaking on culturally relevant teaching and what we as educators need to do for our students. And the question is really, where do I begin? I want to lean into this work. I want to do better for my students. How do I do? Where do I start? So here we go. Here's Patrick as Avi today.
So when I think back to how I started this journey towards being more culturally relevant, to being an equitable educator, there are two great ways to start. So the first one is examine your own data. It's really hard for people to argue with their own data, although some people do try. But when I examined my own data as a fresh out of college first year teacher, I was going to change the world. And then I realized there were some equity issues in the system into which I had chosen to go into as my profession. So examining the data entailed me as this fresh out of college kid who understood quickly that my data was showing there was a problem in the system. So a great example of that is, as a first year teacher, I had the privilege to teach 7th grade science. And the way our school was set up was I had one section of advanced 7th grade science, and I had 5 sections of regular 7th grade science. In a school that was probably 50-50 in terms of students of color and white students, my advanced 7th grade science class was 100%, 100% white middle class kids who all came from the same neighborhood. The 5 sections sort of looked like the school. That was data. That the first thing I noticed was, how is that possible? How is it possible that the data are skewed to where one class is 100% white upper middle class kids and every other class looks like the school? So that was my first piece of data. The second piece of data that really had me catch on that something was wrong in the system was the data on discipline. Whenever I had students go to in-school suspension for whatever reason, and again, I didn't know why they were there, I didn't write them up, but all of a sudden, students started disappearing, and I'd say, where is John? Where is Samantha? They were in in-school suspension. So I would go visit in-school suspension because I wanted to maintain the relationship with my students and say, hey, I can't wait for you to come back. Or I would even go get them out of there. I'd say, oh, can I go get them out of there just for, I've set up a lab and I can't repeat it. So can he come with me? And all the other kids would say, take me with you too. So when I go into that room, this in-school suspension room is 100% kids of color, a lot of them from a certain apartment complex. How is that possible? So in terms of fixing the how, it now takes courage. You must have the courage to have that conversation. It's not popular, it's not fun, but I had to have the courage. As Maya Angelou said, without courage, you'll do nothing consistently. You'll do some things sometimes, but nothing consistently. So I started having that conversation with the data, and I realized, oh, the system is set up for this. The system you have in place is perfectly designed for the results you're getting. And once I realized that, I understood that it's not the kids, it's the system. And so I had to have the courage to say, either Boys of color are just prone to misbehaving naturally and prone to being in special education overrepresented, or there's a problem in the system. Now, let's discuss which one that might be. Either black boys are just horrible in terms of behavior naturally, or something's happening systemically here to set up a place where honors looks one way, special ed self-contained looks another way, in-school suspension looks another way. You have to have the courage to have that conversation. And once we had the conversation, then we were able to do something about it. But also remember, power concedes nothing without a struggle. That's Frederick Douglass. So what we need to do is be prepared to have the conversations, be prepared to have some thick skin, be prepared for people to disagree with you, put on your battle armor, because it's not a fun journey. But when you realize why you're doing it, I was doing it so that all students could be college and career ready, and you can't have all students college and career ready when some students have access to courses of rigor. So having the courage to have the conversations and also being prepared for people to disagree with you. And that's where building relationships with other adults in the building started to help me, because no one wanted to hear all of the issues, all of the problems, all of the data that were skewed based on whatever reason. They wanted to believe that they were great teachers, and we all were. We were doing the best we knew how. So building relationships with other educators to say, hey, let me start with some like-minded educators. That's the best place to start. No matter where you are, no matter who's in your building, there are other people, other educators who believe and feel the same way you do about educating all kids. I believe all teachers believe that all kids should be college, career, workforce, military ready. But in terms of the inequities in the system, you're going to have disagreement there. So start with like-minded individuals and then build that coalition to a critical mass to now all of us are talking the same language about equity and college and career readiness for all kids.
Thank you for that wisdom, Patrick. And as we continue this journey together in this time, know that if you have an Ask Abby question, you can tweet that to us on Twitter with hashtag AskAbby, and we are dying to hear your questions and bring in an Abby just specifically to answer your question. All right, so today our guest, who will be with us for a pre-recorded segment that we recorded earlier, and will also be with us for a question and answer session live at the end of her segment. So be thinking of questions for her. But we have Yadisha Alsop, who's a program manager in AVID's Eastern region. She is celebrating her 15th year in education. She's a staff developer for our culturally relevant teaching strands. She has experience teaching online, and she is finishing up her dissertation and will be, defending it as soon as this crisis is over and she's able to, on what culturally relevant teaching professional learning, actually how it changes the teacher instructional behaviors. And I can't imagine anyone better to talk about this with us today. So just be prepared to take notes, be prepared to tweet out the wisdom that she's going to bring to this. You are going to want to listen to Yadisha also talk about what we do to make our classrooms feel safe and have that culturally relevant experience that we want our students to have, to be a culturally responsive place. She's also going to talk to us about how we just can avoid unknowingly highlighting privilege or inequity, and she's going to call you to action and tell you it takes courage, but you can do it, and she has some tips for you. So here we go. Let's take a look at what Yadisha has to say. Thank you so much for being here with us on the Virtual Collaborative today, Yadisha. We are talking, we wouldn't want to do it without you. So we're just talking about virtual learning and culturally relevant teaching practices. And couldn't imagine anyone better to be with us. This is such a part of who you are as a person, as an educator. I know that you're doing your research dissertation, which we can't wait to celebrate with you when all of this craziness is behind us and you get to actually defend that, right?
Yes, we're waiting for the day.
The day. And so you've had experience teaching online classes, and I think that that's another part of this that's important, is that for so many educators that are teaching online right now, and having to think about just how they do everything differently. And so I think I just would like to start with, what does it look like to incorporate culturally relevant teaching practices into a virtual classroom? And if you need to start with just like, what is culturally relevant teaching as a gateway, to just jump on in.
Absolutely. So, one, thank you for having me. I'm always excited to talk about culturally relevant teaching, culturally responsive teaching, because curriculum is what it is, but who we are, how we are, where we come from, what we bring to the space, that's what makes the learning come alive. And so when we think about culturally relevant teaching, we're looking at how do we take what we want to share as far as information that can be processed and applied and built upon and engage with people who are not us. So that means our students. We're all so beautifully unique. And when we think about the learning space, culturally relevant teaching, the requirements are the same in the classroom physically as well as in the virtual classroom. So there are a couple of things that come to mind, such as trust and inclusion, making sure that the learning space in a digital world is a place where our students feel safe, where they are fully included, where they've come from, their culture, their life experiences. That has to be what we see as added value. We can't control who they are, and we should never want to, but whoever they show up as and however they come, we have to make sure that they're able to be safe in this place. If we have students that have special needs, they may speak varied languages, they may just have a need for a hug. This needs to be a place where they can get support. For many students, teachers are their strength, their joy, their person, and they have to still have that in the virtual space. I would also think about the fact that the learning, just as it should in the classroom, the physical room, it should be student-centered, student-driven. Yes, you have curriculum and standards that will set the framework for what we're going to do, but how we do it is where the beauty of CRT comes in. If you have to teach math, how do I make that come alive for my students? How do I make sure that they get a chance to collaborate in the virtual learning space? Especially, they're not physically together, which means that sometimes we'll give, an individual assignment. Maybe they have packets for those who may not have the ability to use digital resources right now. Don't leave them with just individual work. Actually give them collaborative opportunities so that they can be connected, so they can process and make meaning. The other thing to think about, particularly during this time with virtual learning, is that this is new for most people, not everybody, but many people. This experience is very unfamiliar. It's a little unnerving for teachers, administrators, students, families, everybody. And when we think about that, grace is a necessity in a culturally relevant space, because we need our students to know we can just be, we're okay, we're going to get to the learning, and we're going to be okay even after that. So those are the things I would think about when you wonder, what does it look like in a culturally relevant virtual classroom?
Oh, I love that. I love that line. Grace is a necessity in this virtual learning space. That's fantastic and such a great reminder. So you provided some just really practical, I think, tips and thoughts around how to do this. And I think what I love the most is that you're really speaking to the heart of this, is bringing yourself, knowing who you are and bringing your authentic self to the classroom as an educator, and then letting students, creating a space where students can do the same. And so with that, I'm just wondering how an educator might unknowingly create a virtual learning environment that's actually highlighting privilege or inequity, and what should we do to avoid stepping into any of Completely unintentional. So grace for all of us, but just unintentionally setting up a space that highlights privilege or inequity. So what are some thoughts you have about that?
Wow, that's a big question. You use the word, two words that are important at any time, and that's privilege and inequity. Everybody has privilege of some kind. That's not always a bad thing. The problems that we experience often with privilege are when we misuse that privilege and when we use our privilege to hinder or delay someone else's progress. It is okay if we all thrive. That is actually a good thing. And having privilege, I wouldn't apologize for it. I'd ask us not to do harm. In this particular season, we absolutely need to avoid doing any kind of harm, please. But when we think about that, if I had to kind of give a few do's and don'ts during this time to temper your privilege, temper your I don't want to sound crazy, but will for ignorance needs to be done away with. At this point, it's time for everybody to lean in. I need you to tap into experiences that are unfamiliar for you. Just because your household has the things that it needs, everybody doesn't. And it's not always a matter of, oh, they didn't try or they didn't do enough. You don't know that. You do not know that. And we have to be very patient with our families because this is a very trying time for all of us. So when I think about the don'ts of this experience, don't assume. Don't assume ability. Don't assume access. Don't assume stability. Don't assume digital literacy. Just because students can use social media platforms and tools and they can do classroom apps that we guide them through every single day does not mean that they are truly digitally literate, which also means their families may or may not be. So yes, they're going to ask questions over and over for things that you think are so simple. That's not. And we have to give them the opportunity to say, I just don't understand. Help me. This is our chance to do the one-on-one connecting we've been wanting to do forever. We don't always have time during the school day, but you really have to think about, also not assuming disinterest or an unwillingness. Many of our students want to be connected, but what's happening in their home space just might not support the ability to do it the way we would hope. What I would also suggest is that we do learn to respect boundaries. If a student tells you no, or I can't, or a parent tells you they won't be on today, there's no need for you to fight that. You don't know what's happening there, and they are just trying to keep it together in most cases. Be respectful of that, because if the tables were turned, you would want the same grace. I would also say for teachers between each other, some of us in education, we can't pay our rent right now. This didn't just hit our students' family, it hit everybody. And so we need to be patient enough to understand people are doing the best that they can when they can. Don't assume that a child's response that isn't as familiar to you is intentionally disrespectful. They're dealing with emotions that are theirs, that are shared in their households. We don't know what trauma is happening for them right now, and we have to be just cognizant enough to say, whatever you need, if I can help you, I'll do that. If you can't do all of what I ask right now, do what you can. If you just want to talk to me, that's fine. But offering the patience and the empathy, not necessarily sympathy all the time, but understand it's different. If you've never been without, this might not be something you really can process, but know that there are people who have been, and they're going to be even more after this for some time. We need to be prepared to support them however we can, and know that you're doing what you can, and just stick to that.
I love it. I love it, because what you're speaking to is the fact that culturally relevant teaching isn't necessarily a way to, it's not something you do, it's who you are, right? Like it's really about just being authentic, being yourself, being vulnerable. And I know that as educators lean into this work and use this as an opportunity to just learn more about themselves, they will come out of this even stronger. And so that's a question for you that we're probably going to just end on is, we can't fake this. And so as educators are leaning into this work, how do you see them, or how do you hope that they come out of this even stronger?
I think the statement you just made, you can't fake this. You couldn't fake this in person, so you surely cannot fake it online. Don't try, it's not worth it. I am hopeful, number one, that educators, as one of my colleagues, Tamika Johnson, shared with me, they've got to up their digital pedagogy. What you were able to do in the classroom should add to what you're going to be able to do digitally. Thinking about those strategies that we've used in our classrooms, be it quick writes to help our students experience written reflection. Do that now. You know, commit to having them participate in Socratic seminars and four corners and philosophical chairs to process and really discuss important information, relevant topics that are of interest to them. Give them a chance to just laugh. It's okay if you just act up with your kids sometimes. As teachers come out of this season, I want them to realize you have to be a fighter. If you've never truly fought for kids like you wish you would have before yesterday, here's your chance. Because our children are going to need a whole lot of support. We're going to need a lot of support. And I think that if teachers come out of this more tuned in, more willing to understand things that are different than their personal norms, willing to say, no, I have to speak up, because what my students are missing can't stay that way. I need people to come out true warriors, even more than before, for our children, for our families, because we depend on them just as much as they depend on us, and we will be victorious. I refuse to believe otherwise, but we're going to have to choose to learn that in this season, we're going to get some scars. And I heard a message recently that really supported me in this time. And it said, you know, you're going to have some scars sometimes. And, you know, you think about as a child, when you fall and bruise your knee, you get the scar starts to heal over. Don't bother that. And the messenger simply said, you know, but those scars are going to tell a story. And they're going to tell a powerful story of how we made it through. And I need teachers and educators and families to come out of this ready to do just that. You might have some wounds, but let's get up and get back to the battlefield, because our children deserve that.
Oh my goodness, such fantastic wisdom from you today. So we're going to be back with Yadisha for questions and answers, and to share some resources. This is her research, so she has some places for you to go if you learn more and be a learner during this time, and she's calling you to action with that. So during our Q&A, we will talk about those resources and where you can grab them, and also answer your questions. Yadisha, thank you so much for being here with us today, and look forward to seeing you after this. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
So we get to be live with this incredible human being, and I'm so happy. And there are questions that are rolling in. So as we transition over to the question and answer session live with our very own Yadisha Alsop, our first question for you that is coming in is, are there any resources that you would recommend?
Absolutely. There are countless resources that folks can use. And I would start by saying anything, as far as if you're looking for something to read, I would look for anything by Gloria Ladson-Billings, Geneva Gay, Zaretta Hammond, Dr. Sean Harper, Pedro Noguera. Those are some researchers that may be familiar to many, but they do lots of work in this area. I would also recommend a couple of my teammates, Tamara Gilliam and Tamika Johnson, shared a few with me as well. Tolerance.org is a great resource for teachers and school leaders to tap into, to learn, to get quick ideas, but everything that can actually be done, nothing that's above our heads. Also, edtrust.org is another good website that helps you to stay in tune with how what's happening with education is impacting larger life and world issues. I would also suggest ASCD's Educational Leadership Journal, a phenomenal tool that will offer you ongoing information to just help you process various experiences in education, but particularly around CRT, as well as other factors that impact our students' learning abilities.
Oh, fantastic. So that we will be placing links and some of these resources that Yadisha has mentioned up on our AVID.org Virtual Collaborative page that you can visit and grab if you want more information about those. And all at CRT Nation on Twitter, one-stop shop for inspiration and just doing this work well. Okay, so another question is really specific do's and don'ts in the synchronous learning. So you gave us some just things to think about, but if you could just think of like a very specific, like here's something that you could do in your virtual classroom that would create safety and space for students. You talked about quick writes, you talked about just up in our pedagogy, but just in some of those things that we might not even really be thinking about as being a culturally relevant piece.
Awesome question. I would say, number one, check the pulse of your students every day. Just as you would when they come to school, you ask them, good morning, how are you? How are you feeling? I hope you're asking that. If you are, now's a good time to start that. You could do simple things if you're using digital platforms, such as putting up 4 or 5 emojis that show emotion and allowing them to say, here's how I'm feeling. Take the time to actually hear from them, because you have to remember, while parents are probably wishing school was open, they're at home with families and experiences that we don't necessarily know, some good, some not as favorable, but they probably want to be away from home just as much as others want them to be. And so giving them a chance to kind of have an escape with us being online is a good thing for our kids, but just remember to be patient. And if they don't want to turn on a camera, you don't know the reason for that, but say, okay, let them use a chat box. Don't push away any opportunity for them to engage however they like. And I'd also recommend journaling, because a lot of our children may need therapeutic moments. And this is a good time to encourage them to just write down how they feel so that it comes out rather than staying in.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, another question from a viewer is, how do we break the mindset that culturally relevant teaching is only about race? I think that's such a misconception, right? Like I see the students that are coming into my classroom and I feel like I need to be culturally responsive or not based on who's showing up, and that's not true. Right.
You know, that's not an uncommon belief. Race is absolutely a part of it, so we're not going to act as though it is not. However, there is so much more to what culture means, so let's be clear about that. And when we talk about relevancy and relating to people, we're talking about ableism, we're talking about privilege, we're talking about access, expectations, stereotypes, name it. Poverty puts us in a space where we can be disconnected. Simple things like that. So we have to, I think the problem is people are choosing to say that it is just about race. What I encourage them to choose to finish the conversation and realize that there are a whole lot of other pieces that go into that. Just as with AVID, when we do our culturally relevant teaching, we make it very clear that there's a whole lot more to that. We could be dealing with gender, sexuality, anything. Race is one of the puzzle, and I think it's short-sighted for people to think that it's only about race. You cut yourself out of an opportunity to grow and to be a positive contribution to the rest of the world by keeping it a one experience. There's a lot more to it, and I think it's just a matter of choosing to realize and acknowledge the truth of that. So I don't know that there's a special way to do that, except don't, look for the other pieces and respond accordingly, because we're more than the color of our skin, and everybody's clear about that. If they're not, I hope they'll take this season to learn that.
Yeah, fantastic advice, Yadisha. Thank you so much for being here with us. And I am just calling every one of you out there to work, because that's what our kids need. So
They deserve
as we move forward, be a warrior. That's what our kids need, and come together in this. And so just continue down this journey that we're on there. Looking into next week, we have a topic that is lined up that really segues very nicely. So many of your questions were, how do we do this? How do we create community and action and fun in this classroom to go back to. And so next week we're going to have been canceled. COVID-19 has caused a whole lot of other things, but not that. So that's going to be a fantastic place for you to come back to. We have Dr. Stephanie Couch, the executive of MIT, will be here with us, and Solomon will be our very Avi. So let's get a great Ask Avi question out to Ben Solomon, as long as some other fun surprises for you. So continuing forward, just this work together because it matters, because our students need us to do this work, and let's keep coming to the narrative. Let's share the great content we are curating here for you. If you like it, please share it, please tweet it, please share that this is a place to go to just recharge. And with that, as we think about what we do, our Why We Teach moment today is with a really special, her name is Cassandra Gutierrez, and she's going to talk a little bit about the May 5th live cast for AVID alumni, so you don't want to miss that. That's going to be fantastic. Her Why We Teach moment is something that is just lined up specifically for every educator out there who is doing double duty right now and schooling their own children, care of making sure that they are having access to learning while taking care of the students that you're looking for. Listen to this, because she just reminds you that our kids are watching. All of our kids are watching. Thank you. Be well.
I would like to thank my 5th grade teacher. Her name was Mrs. Lemos, or is Mrs. Lemos. That is my mother. And I remember in 5th grade, she really held me accountable like she would any other students. Several of the other students didn't even know that she was my mom. And she would call home, she would call my dad as if he was my parent that needed to hold me accountable at home to do my homework as well. So that, just seeing her treat everyone equally has just really inspired me. And the way she gives her all in her classroom just always inspires me. And through these trying times right now, I see her Zooming with her students and emailing parents, and I think that's just so amazing. And I haven't just seen her do it, but I've seen other teachers also putting in that effort to really reconnect with students during these trying times, because these are difficult, challenging, and times of uncertainty. So for teachers to be that comfort zone and that support, it's amazing to see teachers still be able to connect with students and serve as their comfort, and not just comfort, also as their learning facilitators. It's important for our mind to continue to grow and to learn, and our teachers play a huge part in that growth as young teens, and teens going into young adults as well, and young kids also learning the alphabets right now. So it's just really inspiring me to see all the teachers giving it their all during this time. And we just thank you guys so much, and thank you, Mom, for all that you do, not just for me but for your students. I really admire you as a mother, but more than ever now, I admire you as a teacher and the love you have for your kids and your staff and faculty. It's really inspiring me.
Hi, AVID family. I'm Kayla Parrish, a member of the AVID team, and I'm coming to you to let you know about next week's Spirit Week. We saw lots of our schools celebrating virtual Spirit Weeks online, and we decided we want to bring all of the AVID schools together to celebrate a massive virtual Spirit Week. So Monday, we've got Pajama Day, because everybody wants to ease into Monday, right? Tuesday, we have 80s Day, and that's kind of honoring our 40th anniversary because AVID was born in the 80s. Wednesday, we want to see your AVID gear and school colors. We love seeing the creativity of our schools with the AVID gear and shirts that you have. Thursday's Hero Day. You guys are obviously our heroes, so that's how we're going to dress. And then Friday is actually College Signing Day. So we will be celebrating all the AVIDers who are making choices for where they're going to go next. And as you're celebrating, please post on your favorite social media channels with hashtag AvidSpirit, and hopefully you, your staff, and your students can join in the fun. Thanks so much.